Well, you know what common sense is. Common sense is a human faculty which tells us that the earth is flat. On the other hand, objective observation tells us that the earth is round. In tonight's debate, I will argue that objective observation, as well as reason and logic, lead to the conclusion that a God with the traditional attributes of the Christian God does not exist beyond a shadow of a doubt. I will give 4 arguments to support my position. Number 1, the attributes of the Christian God are self-contradictory. They're like a square circle. Number 2, the attributes of the Christian God are inconsistent with what we know about the world. Number 3, supernatural explanations for events in the universe are unnecessary. Natural explanations are simpler, are based on objective observations, and are fully consistent with all we know about the world. Number 4, the attributes of the Christian God imply actions that should be objectively observable, but they are not. God has not been detected. Then he lists a set of attributes that are traditionally associated with the God of the monotheistic religions, but particularly Christianity. He's the creator of the universe. He's immaterial and transcendent. He's all-powerful, all-knowing, all-good, and indeed perfect in every way. Furthermore, God is a person. He loves humans and wishes us to know him. He's forgiving and merciful. Speaks to humans, revealing truths to us that we would not otherwise know. And he answers prayers as he sees fit and performs miracles violating natural laws. Now, many philosophers have argued that the traditional attributes of God are logically incompatible. Here are just a few of these. Let's consider perfect versus creator. If God is perfect, then he has no needs or wants. This is incompatible with the notion that God created the universe for some divine purpose. Divine purpose implies that God wants something he doesn't already have, which makes him imperfect. Transcendent versus omnipresent. How can a God beyond space and time be at the same time everywhere in space and time? Just versus merciful. To be just means to treat a person exactly as they deserve. To be merciful means to treat a person better than they deserve. You can't do both. Immaterial versus personal. To be a person is to have a material body, to have a brain, to have a mouth that you speak with, and so on. So God, with these and many of the other attributes that are traditionally assigned to him, does not exist. Now, the God of monotheism also has attributes that are inconsistent with what we know about the world. For example, an all-powerful, all-knowing God, who also has the attribute of wanting all humans to know and love him, is inconsistent with the fact that there are non-believers in the world. Perhaps the most ancient and strongest of the arguments for God's non-existence is the problem of evil. An all-good, all-powerful, all-knowing God is simply inconsistent with the fact of evil and gratuitous suffering in the world. Now, theologians have, of course, grappled with the problem of evil for centuries, and they still do. For example, a prominent contemporary theologian, Richard Swinburne, says of the problem of evil, if the world was without any natural evil and suffering, we wouldn't have the opportunity to show courage patience, and sympathy. Yeah, certainly pain has a role in warning us of illness and injury. But does God really need so much suffering to achieve his ends? Is there any good purpose behind so many children dying every day in the world, of starvation and disease, perhaps one every few seconds? How are they helped by the rest of us becoming more sympathetic? Now, Dr. Craig and many other theologians have spent their lives building models of a God that are logically consistent and at the same time in broad agreement with traditional teachings of Christianity. Now, this has mainly consisted of trimming God's characteristics one by one until he's defined mostly in the negative. Non-material, not in space and time, not seen or heard. Apologists have reduced God to an almost undetectable background, something like what we physicists used to call the ether, until we found that the ether doesn't exist either. Now, I have no doubt that a logically consistent picture of some kind of God can be devised, and I've never claimed to disprove the existence of every conceivable God. That's why I've been very careful to focus on the God with the traditional attributes of Christianity in particular, but to some extent the other monotheistic religions as well. Now, while it's possible to create a logically consistent God, I have serious doubts that God can be made consistent with Christianity. In any case, these theologians and their logically consistent gods remind me of the creators of computer games. Programmers invent whole new universes in which the characters have all kinds of superhuman powers, and many of our familiar laws of physics are violated, yet these games are all logically consistent. They wouldn't run on a computer if they weren't. But the computer game universes have little connection to the universe we see around us. They don't exist in our reality. They exist in what's called virtual reality. But just because something is logically consistent, it doesn't necessarily follow that it exists. For the theologian's logically consistent God to actually exist, he must have something to do with the observed universe, some attributes that can be objectively observed. Otherwise, God is as useless as the ether. Now, even if a God can be devised who is consistent with logic and with observations, natural explanations for phenomena are still better than supernatural ones. They better explain the existence of non-believers. They also better explain the existence of believers, I should say. They explain the existence of evil and gratuitous suffering. They're the unfortunate result of evolution. They better explain the origin and structure of the universe, of life and mind. And these notions are based on objective observations and theories that are testable. Supernaturalism, on the other hand, offers no explanation at all, except God did it. And to say God did it, as Dr. Craig does, it passes us on no more information than to say Santa Claus did it or the Easter Bunny did it. It could be any entity. Now, only 7% of the members of the National Academy of Sciences believe in the personal God worshipped by perhaps 80 to 90% of other Americans. Most scientists don't believe in God because they don't see any objective evidence for him. When they look at the world around them, they see no sign of God. They don't see God when they peer through their most powerful telescopes. They don't detect God with their most sophisticated microscopes and other instruments.